The cold hit me before the insult. Dark red liquid soaking into my white silk blouse, ruining the fabric instantly. It was a 1990 vintage worth $3,000, a gift I had brought to celebrate. Now it was dripping from my mother's hand onto the floor. She didn't look sorry. She looked righteous. "It is better than you deserve, you selfish brat," she sneered. All because I had calmly refused to sign over the deed to my new loft to my sister. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply turned on my heel and walked out the door, leaving the stain and them behind. Drop a comment below and tell me, what is the one line a family member said to you that you will never ever forgive? I read every single one. My loft is silence and exposed brick. It is 12-foot ceilings and cool polished concrete floors. It is the architectural antithesis of my parents' house, which is all clutter, noise, and performative warmth. When I unlocked the heavy steel door and stepped inside, the quiet didn't feel lonely. It felt like armor. I walked straight to the utility sink in the laundry room, stripped off the silk blouse, and turned the tap to cold. The water rushed out, clear and biting. I watched it turn pink as it hit the fabric, swirling down the drain like diluted blood. Scrubbing the stain was a mechanical act. It was something I could fix, unlike my family. As my knuckles turned red under the freezing water, my mind drifted back, not to the dinner but to the years that built the road to it. I realized then that I had never really been part of their family. I was just the infrastructure that held it up. In psychology, they call it the glass child syndrome. It usually refers to the healthy sibling of a sick child, the one who is looked through because the parents are so focused on the one with needs. But in my house, Alyssa wasn't sick. She was just needy. She was a black hole of attention, consuming every ounce of energy in the room. And because I was competent, because I did my homework without asking, because I saved my allowance, because I fixed my own problems, I became invisible. I wasn't the black sheep. The black sheep gets attention, even if it is negative. I was the glass pane they looked through to admire Alyssa's reflection. I remember being 16. I had just landed my first job at a drafting firm, filing papers. I was so proud. I came home to tell them, but before I could get a word out, the house was in chaos. Alyssa, then 13, had failed a math test. My mother was on the phone hiring a tutor. My father was consoling her with ice cream. They didn't even look up when I walked in. I went to my room, closed the door, and realized that my competence was my curse. If I didn't need them, I didn't exist to them. Alyssa learned early that helplessness was a currency. If she cried, she got paid. If she failed, she got rescued. I learned the opposite. Independence was the only way to survive without being consumed. I paid for my own car. I paid for my own college applications. I took out loans so they wouldn't have to look at my financial reality. I built a life of steel and concrete, durable and self-sustaining, while they built a house of cards for Alyssa. The wine stain was fading, leaving a pale, ghost-like shadow on the silk. It was ruined, of course. You can't unbreak an egg and you can't unstain white silk, just like I couldn't unsee the truth of what happened tonight. They didn't want my loft because they needed a home. They wanted it because it was the one thing I had that Alyssa didn't. My success was an affront to their narrative. How dare the glass child build a castle while the golden child is still renting? I turned off the tap. The water stopped instantly. Silence returned. I wrung out the shirt and tossed it into the trash. I wasn't going to try to save it. I was done trying to save things that were already destroyed. I looked around my loft, my sanctuary, my proof of life, and I felt a cold resolve hardening in my chest. They wanted to take this from me. They thought they could shatter the glass. But they forgot that glass, when broken, becomes a blade. The week before the dinner, I was vibrating with a frequency that felt like hope, but was actually anxiety. I had just laid the final brick in the kitchen backsplash. The loft was done. It was perfect. And for the first time in years, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this achievement would be the one that made them see me. It is a sickness, this hope. It is the invisible chain that yanks survivors back to the people who broke them. You think you are free because you have your own address and your own money, but the chain is still there, hooked into the soft part of your child self that just wants your mother to say, "Good job." I wanted to celebrate. I wanted to share this victory. So I went to a specialty wine shop downtown. I asked for a 1990 vintage, my birth year. It cost $3,000. I didn't buy it to show off. I bought it because I wanted to bring something valuable to the table, something that said, "I am valuable too." I thought if the wine was exquisite enough, maybe the evening would be too. I remember holding the heavy bottle, feeling the cool glass, imagining the scene. My father pouring it. My mother tasting it and finally smiling at me without that tight judgmental purse of her lips. Alyssa actually asking about my design process. It was a fantasy, vivid and pathetic. Then the text came. Celebration dinner. Don't be late. My stomach dropped. Not excitement. Dread. The chain tightened. I knew deep down that celebration usually meant Alyssa has done something mediocre that we must all applaud, or Alyssa needs something, but I ignored the gut instinct. I put on my best white silk blouse armor made of luxury and convinced myself this time would be different. I told myself I was going as an equal. I didn't know I was walking into an ambush. I didn't know the chain wasn't a tether to a family. It was a leash pulling me to the slaughter. I walked into that house carrying a peace offering worth more than their car, blind to the fact that they didn't want my wine. They wanted my blood. The dining room was a masterclass in performative elegance. Crystal glasses, linen napkins, a roast that smelled of rosemary and garlic. It was the set of a play titled The Perfect Family, and I had been cast as the extra who was supposed to be grateful for a line. I placed the vintage wine on the table. My father Michael nodded at it, not with appreciation but with the air of a king accepting a tribute. Sit, he said. Alyssa was already seated, her hand resting protectively on her baby bump. She looked radiant and smug. The twins are kicking, she announced, and my mother cooed, spooning potatoes onto her plate as if she were feeding a toddler. For the first 20 minutes, I didn't exist. The conversation revolved around Alyssa's discomfort. Her rental was too small. The landlord was noisy. The school district was subpar. I don't know how we're going to manage, she sighed, casting a side eye at her husband, Joseph, who kept his head down and ate his peas. Then the pivot happened. It was so smooth, it had been rehearsed. Well, my mother said, wiping her mouth delicately. Sarah has plenty of space. I looked up, fork halfway to my mouth. It's a 2-bedroom, I said cautiously. It's enough for me. It's 2,500 square feet, my father corrected. He knew the specs. Of course he did. He had probably looked up the listing the moment I mentioned the renovation. In the arts district, market value $650,000. The air in the room shifted. The temperature dropped. It is a waste, my mother said. One person in all that space, and you work 80 hours a week. You're never even there to enjoy it. I enjoy it when I sleep, I said, trying to keep my voice light. I enjoy it when I pay the bills. That's the thing my father said. He put his fork down. The metal clinked against the china, sounding like a gavel. We've been discussing it as a family. Alyssa needs the space. She needs the stability for the grandchildren. You are single. You are mobile. You can rent a studio near your office. I stopped chewing. I looked at Alyssa. She wasn't looking at me. She was inspecting her manicure, waiting for her prize. Are you asking to move in? I asked. No, my father said. We aren't asking for a roommate situation. That wouldn't work. We want you to transfer the deed. The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Excuse me. Transfer the title to Alyssa, my mother said, as if asking me to pass the salt. It's the only fair solution. We supported you for 18 years. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. You owe the family. This balances the ledger. You sign the loft over to your sister and we'll call it even for raising you. I looked at them. I looked at the faces of the people who were supposed to be my safety net. They weren't asking. They were collecting a debt I didn't know I had accrued. They genuinely believed that my childhood was a loan, and my success was the repayment plan. They didn't see my hard work, my late nights, my savings. They saw a resource to be harvested for the golden child. The audacity was so pure it was almost beautiful. It was a diamond of entitlement. You want me to give her a $650,000 property? Because you fed me as a child, I asked, my voice calm, clinical. Don't be vulgar, Sarah, my mother snapped. It's about family. It's about doing what is right. I looked at Alyssa. Do you think this is right? She shrugged, offering a small, pitying smile. You've always been good at taking care of yourself, Sarah. I need help. You don't. There it was. My competence was the weapon they used to gut me. Because I could survive without them, they decided I should survive for them. I stood up. I picked up my napkin and placed it on the table. No, I said. My mother's face twisted. What did you say? I said no. The loft is mine. I built it. I paid for it. That was the trigger. My mother stood up, her face flushing a violent, ugly red. She grabbed the nearest thing to her, the glass of vintage wine I had poured for her. "You selfish, ungrateful brat," she screamed, and she threw it. The days following the dinner were a cacophony of digital noise. I didn't block them. I needed the evidence. My phone vibrated across the coffee table like a dying insect, spasms of notifications lighting up the dark loft. Alyssa didn't wait 24 hours. She posted a video to her 50,000 followers. She was crying, no makeup, sitting in her nursery. "I just wanted my babies to have a home," she sobbed into the camera. "But my own sister. She cares more about her fancy bachelor pad than her family. She humiliated our mom. She's evicting my happiness." She didn't mention the wine. She didn't mention the demand for the deed. She curated the narrative just like she curated her feed. Then came the texts from my father. "You are dead to us. Do not contact us until you are ready to sign the papers and apologize to your mother." My mother's messages were shorter. "You are a stain on this family." I sat in the glow of my laptop screen. The white silk shirt was in the trash, but the memory of the cold wine soaking into my skin was still fresh. It had clarified everything. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as an appliance that had malfunctioned. And when an appliance breaks, you replace it, or you throw it out. I opened a secure folder on my hard drive, labeled Lakeside Asset. They thought they had leverage. They thought cutting me off was a punishment. They forgot that I was the one keeping the lights on. 5 years ago, my father's business investments, essentially gambling on high-risk stocks, had imploded. The bank foreclosed on the Lakeside estate. They were days away from the sheriff putting a padlock on the door. They never told me, of course. I found out because I track public auctions. I couldn't let them be homeless. I couldn't let them face that humiliation. So, I formed an anonymous LLC. I bought the debt. I bought the house at auction for pennies on the dollar. Then, through a lawyer, I offered them a generous rental agreement from a private investor who wanted a long-term tenant. The rent was $1 a month. The lease had a single specific clause: the tenancy is revocable at will by the landlord for conduct unbecoming or hostility. I had saved their dignity for 5 years. I had let them pretend they still owned their manor, let them sneer at my small apartment, let them play the lords of the manor while I quietly paid their property taxes. I did it because I thought that was what love looked like. I was wrong. Love isn't shielding people from the consequences of their arrogance. That's just enabling. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved for emergencies. "Elena," I said when she answered. "Sarah, it's late. Is everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tremor that had been there at dinner. "It's time." "Time for what?" "The Lakeside Protocol. They breached the morality clause." I heard the typing on her end. Elena was the only person who knew. She was my saber. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Once we file this, there is no going back. It's the nuclear option. They demanded the deed to my loft, Elena." My mother threw wine at me. "They tried to rob me." The typing stopped. "Understood. I'll draft the notice to vacate. 30 days. 30 days, I confirmed, and draft a cease and desist regarding my loft. If they step foot on my property, I want them arrested for trespassing. Consider it done. I'll have the process server there by morning." I hung up. I looked at the file on my screen, the deed to their house with my signature at the bottom. I wasn't the glass child anymore. I was the landlord. And rent was finally due. I was still staring at the screen, watching the digital cursor blink at the end of the eviction notice when my phone rang again. It was Elena. She hadn't hung up. She had put me on hold, running the standard title check required before serving legal papers. "Sarah," she said. Her voice had changed. The sharp professional edge was gone, replaced by something heavier, something like dread. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem? Are they refusing service? It's 2 a.m. "Surely." "No," she interrupted. "I just pulled the updated title report for the Lakeside property. There is a pending lien application." I frowned, leaning closer to the computer. "That's impossible. The property is paid off. I paid cash. There is no mortgage." "It's not a mortgage, Sarah. It's a business loan, a secured line of credit for $100,000. The application was filed 3 days ago." By who, I asked, though the cold sensation in my gut told me I already knew. "The applicants are Michael and Michelle Mitchell," Elena read, listing the Lakeside estate as collateral. "And Sarah, your name is listed as the guarantor. There's a digital signature here that looks a lot like yours. The world stopped spinning. The silence in my loft became deafening, pressing against my eardrums. They forged my signature, I whispered. It looks that way. Or they claimed power of attorney. Either way, they are trying to leverage a property they don't own to secure a six-figure loan. What is the loan for? I heard the clicking of keys. It's listed under New Venture Capital. The business name is Twin Mommy Lifestyle LLC. Registered agent Alyssa Mitchell. I closed my eyes. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with the force of a car crash. The dinner. The urgency. The demand for the deed. They weren't just asking for the loft because Alyssa wanted a nursery. They were desperate. They had already spent the money, or promised it. They had applied for a loan to fund Alyssa's delusional influencer career using my house as the down payment, but the bank must have asked for proof of ownership or the guarantor's confirmation. That's why they needed the deed to the loft. If I transferred the loft to Alyssa, that would be an asset they could legally leverage. Or if I signed the papers they had waiting at dinner, papers I assumed were just transfer documents, I might have been unknowingly co-signing this fraud. They were going to frame me, I said, the realization tasting like ash. If I didn't sign the loft over, they were just going to steal the equity from the lake house, and if the business failed, which it would, the bank would come for me. They were willing to ruin my credit, seize my property, and potentially send me to prison for loan fraud complications just to buy Alyssa a brand. This isn't a civil dispute anymore, Sarah Elena said softly. This is felony fraud, attempted grand larceny, identity theft. If we file this eviction and expose the title, the bank will flag the application. The police will get involved. I looked at the wine stain in the trash can. I thought about my mother's face when she threw the glass. It wasn't just anger. It was panic. She knew the clock was ticking on their lie. They had gambled my life on Alyssa's whim. They had looked at me, their daughter, and seen nothing but a signature to be forged, a resource to be strip-mined until it collapsed. File it, I said. My voice was ice. Sarah, if we do this... File everything, Elena. The eviction, the fraud report. Send the evidence to the loan officer. Burn it all down. Copy that, she said. I'm sending the sheriff. I hung up the phone. I didn't feel sad. I felt the surgical precision of a soldier who finally identifies the enemy. They wanted a war. They just invaded the wrong country. The confrontation didn't happen at my loft. I wasn't going to let them defile my sanctuary again. It happened in the lobby of my architecture firm at 9 a.m. The next morning, they had come to ambush me at work, a classic tactic designed to use public embarrassment as leverage. They expected me to crumble, to hush them, to write a check just to make the scene stop. I watched them from the mezzanine. My father, Michael, was red-faced, marching toward the reception desk. My mother, Michelle, was wearing her victim cardigan, the beige one she wore whenever she needed sympathy, and Alyssa was there, waddling slightly, looking ready to cry on cue. They weren't a family. They were a siege engine. I walked down the glass staircase. I didn't rush. I held a single red file folder in my hand. It was the same shade as the wine my mother had thrown at me. Poetic justice comes in specific colors. There she is, my mother shouted, pointing a manicured finger at me. The receptionist looked terrified. You tell your daughter that she cannot treat her family like garbage. I reached the bottom of the stairs. I didn't look at the receptionist. I looked at my father. Hello, Michael. Michelle. Alyssa. Don't you hello us, my father spat. You blocked our numbers. You think you can just walk away after disrespecting your mother. We are here to settle this. You are going to sign that transfer deed and you are going to apologize, or I will cause a scene that will end your career. I'm sure you would, I said calmly. But before you start screaming, you should read this. I handed the red folder to my father. He snatched it with a sneer, expecting I assume a peace offering or a check. He opened it. The first document was the deed to the Lakeside estate. His eyes scanned the header. Owner of record SM Holdings LLC. He looked confused. Then he looked at the signature line on the transfer from the bank foreclosure 5 years ago. Sarah Mitchell, managing partner. His face went gray. The blood drained out of him so fast I thought he might faint. What is this? He whispered. That is proof of ownership, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the silent lobby. I bought your debt 5 years ago. I own the roof over your heads. You have been living there on a charitable lease for $1 a month. You own the house, Alyssa asked, her voice trembling. But, Daddy said it was paid off. He said it was ours. I turned to my sister. This was the part that would hurt, but surgery always requires an incision. They lied to you, Alyssa, I said. They don't own the house. They don't have any money. They are bankrupt. Liar, my mother shrieked, grabbing for the folder. Don't listen to her. Turn the page, I said to my father. He didn't want to, but his hands moved automatically. The next document was the eviction notice. 30 days, I said. The lease is revocable for hostility. You threw wine at your landlord, Michelle. You tried to extort property from me. That is a breach of contract. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. You can't do that, Alyssa cried. I'm pregnant. We were supposed to move in. They promised me the house. They promised you a house they didn't own, I corrected. But it gets worse. Turn the page again. My father froze. He was looking at the photocopy of the loan application, the one with my forged digital signature guaranteeing a $100,000 line of credit for Twin Mommy Lifestyle, LLC. What is that? Alyssa asked, stepping closer to look over his shoulder. That, I said, is a felony. They applied for a business loan in your name, Alyssa, using my property, which they don't own, as collateral. They forged my signature to do it. I looked my mother in the eye. She was shrinking physically, curling in on herself. You weren't trying to help Alyssa, I said to her. You were trying to steal equity you didn't have. If that loan had gone through and Alyssa's business failed, the bank would have come for me. You were willing to frame me for fraud and potentially send me to prison just to keep up appearances. Alyssa snatched the paper from our father's hands. She stared at it. You forged Sarah's name. You used my company. We did it for you, my mother wailed. We needed the money to help you. You did it because you are thieves, I said. I spoke to the bank this morning. The application has been flagged for fraud. The police have the file. Sarah, please, my father begged, his voice cracking. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the terrified whine of a man caught in the spotlight. We're your parents. Don't do this. I already did, I said. You have 30 days. If you aren't out, the sheriff will remove you. And if you ever come near me or my property again, I will press charges for the identity theft. I turned to Alyssa. She looked sick. She was looking at our parents not as her saviors, but as the anchors that were about to drown her. I suggest you find a new place to live, Alyssa, I said. Because the lake house is closed. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked back toward the glass doors of the secure inner office. Behind me, the lobby erupted, not at me, but at each other. Alyssa was screaming at them. My mother was sobbing. My father was shouting excuses. I swiped my badge. The heavy glass door clicked shut, sealing out the noise. I didn't look back. The loft is quiet again, the kind of quiet that doesn't echo, it settles. I walked to the trash can and looked at the white silk blouse one last time. The burgundy stain had dried into a stiff, ugly bruise. I didn't try to save it. I didn't try to wash it out. I simply tied the bag and carried it to the chute. Gone. Just like them. I opened my banking app. The numbers stared back at me, steady and unmoving. This is what they never understood. Money isn't just for buying things. It isn't for impressing people or buying love. Money is a shield. It is the wall that allows you to say no. It is the freedom to walk away when the people who are supposed to protect you try to consume you instead. My FU fund was never about being rich. It was about being safe. And today it bought my life back. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of wine. Not a vintage. Just a $10 blend I actually like. I poured a glass, sat on my velvet sofa, and looked out at the city lights. I was alone. I was an orphan by choice. And I had never felt so peaceful. If you've ever had to be your own hero because your family wouldn't protect you, share this story. And hit that follow button because we are building a new family here, one boundary at a time.